He drove his vehicle through the front doors of the church. He then exited his vehicle, firing several rounds at individuals within the church.
It was supposed to be a quiet Sunday morning. Families gathered for worship, children sitting beside their parents, voices lifted in prayer. But in an instant, peace turned to absolute chaos. At 10:25 a.m., a vehicle suddenly rammed through the front doors of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan. People thought it was some kind of accident until the driver stepped out. He wasn't there to pray. He wasn't there for peace. He was armed with an assault rifle. Witnesses described sheer terror as the man opened fire, the sound of gunshots echoing through the church halls, screams filling the sanctuary. Parents shielding their children, some diving under pews, others frozen in shock. A frantic 911 call broke the silence outside. "We need manpower up here ASAP. People are trapped in the building. Children are inside too." The desperation in that call told the world what was happening inside. A nightmare unfolding in real time. Neighbors later said the sound of gunfire and then the smell of smoke would stay with them forever. A house of worship turned into a battlefield within seconds. And while police raced to the scene, no one yet knew who this man was or why he had chosen this place. But what they found out about the shooter would leave the entire community asking even more questions.
When the gunfire erupted, officers were already racing against the clock. The first call hit dispatch at 10:25 a.m., and less than 60 seconds later, police were on their way. By 10:33 a.m., barely 8 minutes after the nightmare began, the shooter was confronted outside the church. His name was Thomas Jacob Sanford, a 40-year-old man from the nearby city of Burton. For many in the community, that name meant nothing at first, but the damage he left behind would mark his name forever. Police say Sanford was armed and dangerous right up to the end. When confronted, he refused to surrender. Officers fired back, and within moments, the man who had brought fear and chaos into a sacred space was lying dead in the parking lot. Authorities quickly confirmed his identity, but the motive? That was the question haunting everyone. Was it random? Was it personal? Or was it something darker, something aimed at the faith of the people inside that church? Speculation spread instantly online. Some said Sanford had been battling his own demons for years. Others whispered about past grudges. But one thing was clear. This was not an accident. And the horror didn't stop with the gunfire, because what Sanford did inside the church before his final moments left the community even more shaken.
As if the gunfire wasn't enough, witnesses say Sanford made one more move that turned fear into absolute devastation. Before he was stopped, he set fire to the church. Police later confirmed the blaze was no accident. It was deliberately lit. Flames began spreading as terrified families scrambled to escape. Smoke filled the sanctuary, black and suffocating, while people were still hiding inside. Neighbors watched in disbelief as thick clouds poured from the windows. A woman living across the street said, "This was a quiet neighborhood. We've never seen anything like this." Her voice shook as she described the scene, struggling to believe it was real. For the community, seeing their church engulfed in flames while still hearing the echo of gunshots was almost too much to process. A sacred place where weddings, baptisms, and family gatherings once happened, now scarred with gunfire and fire damage. Authorities later said they believe Sanford had planned this entire act, from the ramming of the car to the shooting to the fire itself. It was an attack meant to leave behind not just victims, but a lasting wound on an entire community. But even as the flames burned, the reality of the human cost was only beginning to unfold. When the smoke cleared, the scale of the tragedy began to surface. Authorities confirmed that 10 people had been shot during the attack. 2 victims were pronounced dead at the scene. Another fought for their life at the hospital, but later passed away. Families that had walked into church together that morning were torn apart forever. 7 more victims were rushed to medical care. Doctors worked through the night, and though most were reported to be in stable condition, one person remained in critical shape. Their fight to survive became a rallying point for the community, with prayers and vigils held outside the hospital. Imagine the shock for parents who had to explain to their children why friends or neighbors would never come home again. Imagine the families waiting by the phone, desperate for updates, clinging to hope in the face of unthinkable loss.
Oh my God.
To help reunite
really
survivors
bad.
with loved ones, officials set up an emergency hotline and a reunification center. People crowded in, scanning faces, desperate to see someone they loved step through the doors. For some, relief. For others, heartbreak. This was no longer just a headline. It was a community living through trauma one family at a time. And while families searched for answers, voices from across the nation began weighing in, turning this tragedy into the center of a much bigger conversation.
News of the Michigan church shooting spread fast. Within hours, it wasn't only a local tragedy, it was national. President Donald Trump spoke out almost immediately, calling the attack another targeted assault on Christians. His words fueled a wave of debate. Was this a hate crime against faith, or the act of one disturbed individual? Online opinions split sharply. Some argued that this was proof of rising hostility toward religious communities. Others pushed back, warning against jumping to conclusions before investigators confirmed a motive. The FBI, the Michigan State Police, and local law enforcement all launched a joint investigation. Every detail of Sanford's life was suddenly under a microscope. His background, his mental state, any connections to extremist groups, nothing was off the table. Meanwhile, religious leaders across the country began issuing statements, some urging calm, others demanding answers. Calls for stronger protection around places of worship grew louder. For many, the shooting wasn't just about Michigan. It raised fears about safety in churches, mosques, synagogues, anywhere people gather to worship. If a sacred place in a quiet town of 40,000 could be targeted, then where was safe? And yet, beyond the politics, beyond the headlines, one truth remained. This was a community in mourning, struggling to understand how their sanctuary had been torn apart. The grief was overwhelming, and the people of Grand Blanc Township were about to show the world how they would respond together. For the 40,000 residents of Grand Blanc Township, life changed in an instant. A town once known for quiet streets and friendly neighbors suddenly became the site of a national tragedy. Local residents gathered near the church, many in tears, staring at the burned and broken building that had once been a cornerstone of their community. One man whispered, "This doesn't happen here." But now it had, and the sense of safety was shattered. To help those in mourning, the township set up support services. At the Genesis Athletic Club, counselors met with families, prayed with survivors, and offered a space to grieve together. Later in the week, the Senior Center opened its doors for more support sessions. People came in silence, some clutching candles, others holding photos of loved ones. Vigils were organized. Crowds stood shoulder to shoulder, holding candles against the night, their voices breaking as they sang hymns. Parents held their children close, trying to reassure them even while their own hearts were heavy with fear. First responders who had rushed into danger that morning were hailed as heroes, but many admitted privately that the scenes inside the church would haunt them forever. This wasn't just about numbers. 10 victims, 3 dead. It was about people, families, neighbors, all connected by a tragedy they never thought would touch their community. And as the days went on, one question lingered over every conversation. If even sacred spaces could be attacked, what did that mean for the future of safety in America? The investigation would continue. The political debates would rage. But for the people of Grand Blanc Township, the focus was on healing and finding a way to move forward from a day that would never be forgotten. In less than 10 minutes, a quiet Sunday service turned into a nightmare. A car rammed through sacred doors. Gunfire echoed where prayers had been spoken. Flames consumed the walls of a church that had stood as a symbol of faith and family. 10 victims, 3 lives lost, countless others scarred forever. The suspect, Thomas Jacob Sanford, was gone, but the questions he left behind were only beginning. Was this a personal vendetta, a targeted act of hate, or the breaking point of a man no one truly understood? For the families who will never see their loved ones again, those questions don't erase the pain. For the children who hid under pews, the memories don't vanish when the news cycle moves on. This was more than a crime scene. It was a warning that even sacred places, even spaces meant for peace, are not untouchable. And now the community of Grand Blanc Township is left to heal, to rebuild, and to prove that their faith and unity are stronger than the violence that tried to tear them apart. So what do you think? Was this a single act of chaos, or part of something larger we should all be worried about? Let us know in the comments, and as always, stay safe, stay aware, and keep the conversation going.
Do everything we can to support the families, the victims, and our community getting through this situation. And it's something that no community ever wants to have. And we're going to do our best to do everything we can